Low energy, motivation through the floor, drinking too much, eating rubbish and feeling like you're super glued to the sofa most of the time. If that sounds like you, you may well be in the thick of something called burnout. And in this video, I'm going to share how burnout crept up on me and caught me like a cruel game of what's the time, Mr. Wolf. And if you're wondering what the heck wolves have got to do with all of this, hang around because I'm going to explain everything.
Hi, I'm Bev. I'm a 57-year-old postmenopausal accidental entrepreneur with ADHD, and my goal is to help other neurodiverse midlife women navigate this often turbulent but hugely exciting time in our lives by sharing the lessons that I've learned about business, productivity, and managing our wonky hormones. Back in January, I recorded a video talking about how I hate the usual type of goal setting and how I much prefer to use what I call the 3 R's. That's about reflecting on the year just gone, reviewing what's currently working and what your priorities are, and then resetting. That's making a plan to chunk those priorities down into bite-sized pieces that you can then plug away at, getting you closer and closer to whatever it is that's really important to you. Well, at the beginning of January, I did do a lot of reflecting. I did a bit of reviewing, but the reset, it just was not happening. And I realised, amongst all of my reflections, that I'd been in a pretty horrible place for at least the last 6 months. I'd neglected my health. I had no energy, no motivation. I was letting my business and my self-care slip. I think it's safe to say that I was letting my business down, I was letting my clients down, I was letting my family down, but ultimately I was really letting myself down. And despite all of the things that I teach about thriving in midlife, I realised I'd been completely ignoring my own advice. And on top of that, I was feeling enormous levels of guilt and shame for not being on the ball and keeping all of my plates spinning. I finally realised I'd reached burnout, and that's a word that we hear quite often, but what is it? What is burnout? Well, according to Mental Health UK, burnout is a state of physical and emotional exhaustion. It can occur when you experience long-term stress in your job, or when you have worked in a physically or emotionally draining role for a long time. And they say that common signs of burnout are feeling tired or drained most of the time, feeling helpless, trapped and or defeated, feeling detached or alone in the world, having a cynical, negative outlook, self-doubt, procrastinating and taking longer to get things done, and feeling overwhelmed. Well, I definitely met the criteria for burnout, and I finally had to admit to myself that I was indeed struggling from being mentally and emotionally burnt out. And even just saying those words out loud brings up feelings of failure for me. And I have to really try hard to ignore that unhelpful voice on my shoulder telling me I should know better and yelling at the top of its lungs, "What is wrong with you?" Of course, I know intellectually that being burnt out is far from a sign of failure. I know that it simply means I've not been prioritising things properly, and I've not been maintaining my boundaries. I've not been taking enough rest, and my body's finally telling me that enough is enough. And the body's funny like that. You think the brain's in charge, but it's not. See, my brain was telling me to keep going, keep hustling, don't stop, keep all those plates spinning. But the body always wins out. Burnout is a response to extended periods of stress, and our instinctive response to stress is to resort to fight, flight, or freeze. And when it comes to burnout, we have no energy to either fight or flee. So our only option is to freeze, and that freeze showed up for me as a kind of mental and physical paralysis. And I don't think the ADHD helps. And of course, I'm well aware that neurotypical people experience burnout too, But I do wonder if for us ADHDers it's like burnout on steroids. Let's face it, we don't really deal that well with overwhelm and productivity issues at the best of times. So throw in a good old dose of chronic stress and fatigue and bam, it really does hit us hard. I think having ADHD and already being prone to procrastination and self-doubt and bouts of mental paralysis means that burnout is maybe a bit harder to spot. We're compensating all the time for the limitations in executive function that we live with constantly. So it makes sense that we might not see when things are getting a bit out of control. I'm glad to say that after a much needed holiday, finally getting a formal diagnosis for ADHD and now having had a month on ADHD meds, I'm just starting the journey to getting myself back on track. And the truth is, I didn't see it coming, and I feel like I should have, especially since I now think it was burnout that caused me to resign my career with the MOD 5 years ago. Although I think at the time, and looking back, I put that down to perimenopause, although in truth I think there was a bit of ADHD in there as well, but I didn't know that at the time. I don't doubt that perimenopause was a major contributor to the burnout too. So I feel like I want to share how this latest burnout showed up for me, and if this resonates at all with you, please don't ignore it. The way it showed up for me was that I was feeling sad. I was lacking motivation, I was losing interest in things that would usually have had me buzzing, and there were days when even simply getting dressed and brushing my teeth was a significant achievement, and I'd slipped into some really bad habits. I was drinking too much, I was going to bed stupidly late, and I was eating a lot of rubbish. And in fact the idea of exercise of any sort felt like I was taking on the north face of Everest. Usually my mind's pretty creative, but I kind of felt like my mind had gone into hibernation. But by a stroke of really good luck, my holiday in January really helped. I went on a Caribbean cruise, which meant having almost zero access to the internet, and that meant I had very little choice but to unplug and to take a break, and it gave me plenty of time to think about and reassess my life. And I'm happy to say, genuinely think I am on the mend, and I've put some things in place to help. I've created a morning routine and a more structured day, which includes more breaks, meditation, time for exercise and time to eat properly. I've created a daily to-do list with alarms to remind me to follow it so I don't forget. I've started to use an alarm clock, which I haven't done for years, to get me up in the morning, and I've also set an alarm to tell me when I need to get ready for bed. You know, one of the worst habits I'd got into, and I think maybe this is quite common for ADHDers, was staying up very late, often into the early hours of the morning, and I'd be literally holding my eyelids open, but I just couldn't get the energy to just get up off the sofa and go to bed, despite being painfully tired. Working for myself from home means it's really easy to lose that structure of getting up and going out to work at a set time every day. And whilst my new routine may look just a little bit like overkill, it does seem to be working. And the step-by-step prompts throughout the day are really helping my ADHD too. I'm 7 days into this new strategy, and so far so good. Just give you a look. This is what my day looks like, and I absolutely love ticking off each item and watching it just disappear off the list. I've absolutely loved getting up at 7, and I never thought I'd say that. I am such a night owl, but it's helping that I'm creating a manageable, sustainable morning routine. I've walked 4 mornings this week and I've run 3, and just getting that morning burst of fresh air and vitamin D is really working wonders at helping me to focus better, feel a bit more energized, and just break that habit of either feeling like I'd wasted a day because I'd struggled just to get started, or the alternative was feeling drained because I'd have dived straight onto the computer, often before I'd even got dressed or had a drink. I'm really loving my morning stretch and the opportunity to do a bit of meditation before my walk. Now, I usually meditate at night, but the morning meditation is helping to keep me grounded and it gives me a chance to really focus on being intentional with my day. I'd definitely say I've got more energy, I'm sleeping better, I'm eating more regularly, and I'm making better choices. And despite only giving myself 3 90-minute blocks of focused work each day, I've definitely been more productive. Now, I have to say my track record for keeping to this kind of routine isn't great. But for now, it does feel like it's working, so I'll make hay while the sun shines, as they say. I genuinely hope you've got a better handle on this than I had. But if you do see any of the signs I've spoken about in your life, I would urge you to stop and take a really good, hard look at what's going on for you. And I know it's really easy to say, look, I'm too busy to put myself first. But you can't treat self-care like you would your best china and only bring it out on special occasions. Your health is the special occasion, and it needs your focus every day. So please don't be me. Get that china out and start using it today. Because I tell you what, your body will shut you down whether you think you're too busy or not. Okay, let's talk about wolves. Now, if you're not familiar with What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, you are probably wondering what the heck I was talking about earlier. But before I explain, I would love you to just give me a thumbs up if you found this video helpful, and let me know in the comments if you've experienced burnout. How did you deal with it? What was your recovery strategy? Anyway, back to the wolf. I thought, as it's very topical at the minute, rather than me tell you what it's all about, I'd jump on the bandwagon and ask ChatGPT to describe what it is, and this is what it gave me. What's the Time, Mr. Wolf is a children's game that's typically played outdoors. The game's played with one person being designated as Mr. Wolf and the other players being the sheep. Now, the goal of the game is for the sheep to get close to Mr. Wolf without being caught. The game starts with Mr. Wolf standing at one end of the playing area and the sheep standing at the other. The sheep then asks, "What's the time, Mr. Wolf?" To which Mr. Wolf replies with a time. For example, "It's 3 o'clock." The sheep then have to take that many steps towards Mr. Wolf. And this continues until Mr. Wolf decides to reply with, "It's dinner time," or "It's midnight," which means the sheep should then run back to their starting point to avoid being caught by Mr. Wolf. Now, I'm pretty impressed with ChatGPT's response to my question, because that's exactly how I remember the game from being a kid. And it really does feel like a pretty good metaphor for how I reached burnout. I was like a sheep that just kept pushing forward, but I just didn't see the wolf coming until it was way too late. And I didn't make it back to the starting line in time before that big bad wolf caught up with me. So do me a favour, keep a damn good lookout for that wolf and don't get caught. And if you are struggling with overwhelm, check out this video where I'm sharing 7 tips to help you de-stress through menopause. But here's the Billy bonus, they'll help you even if you're not menopausal. See you again soon.